Welcome back, audience. Hope you're doing good. Cheers. Yummy, yummy. In this video, I'm going to make it as short as possible. I always say that and go over an hour, but for realsies this time. Um, I just want to share real quick about this idea of dynamic of like saving other people. And this insight came to me as a realization of the natural motion of consciousness as like electromagnetic principle. Okay. And you notice this pattern, and it seems to be natural. The pattern of being that um, you cracking the shell of an egg, so to speak, and popping up into another reality. And by the way, this is usually it's about that the physical, astral, and causal. And there are three types of souls. They call them like pneumatics. These are causal souls. Um, then these psychic and hyalic. And so basically, what it means it's the physical, astral, and causal. And so the souls could function on any of these three levels. And it could be um, physically good or evil, astrally good or evil, and causally good or evil. Right. Well, not exactly true, because you wouldn't consider the soul being causal soul upon the completion of their alchemy. And if you use this definition, then only the astral souls could be evil because they go up to what they call like a 5D, and then the causal soul is a 6D soul. This type of soul has gone through the alchemical process, and this is the only type of soul that breaks this um, demiurge grid. That's the only type of soul that has broken through the demiurge grid. And so a lot of times people talk about like, well, the demiurge grid cannot be broken, and it's a limit. The 5D is a limit, and all that stuff. And that's not true, of course. And alchemists or chemical souls who successfully completed the whole thing, and it's no joke, because to complete the whole thing, it is a feast feat. It's not a feast, it's a feat. um it's a Houdini trick. It's a Houdini trick. It has secrets. There's Anyway, I don't want to go into this too much. It is very hard to do, okay, but it is possible. And I mean, look, a lot of times when people embark on this thing, so they say, I don't know, they say that most souls who embark on this, they don't survive. I don't know whether this is true or not, but I could see that being the case, because the point of breaking through, which is going through the eye of a needle, which is kind of impossible, you know, to have that level of attention in the midst of that much of suffering, and that's why it's so difficult. But it is possible, because if you don't break through, then the suffering will gonna just get you. You're gonna have to either go back into the pleasure seeking, right? Or if you don't go into this pleasure seeking, then killing yourself sounds like a good idea, but of course it's not. You either go through, break through, or go back into the pleasure seeking. But this, the killing yourself part is not really, doesn't really fix anything, because all you do is just kill the body. You still have the astral mind and causal. You're still in the same situation that you've been before. So what I'm trying to say here is that it appears there's this pattern that I observed. there is this, for example, let's talk about physical and astral. There, when there's a time for the physical soul to transition to the astral, and that's usually when they start being interested in all sorts of, telepathic phenomena, psychic phenomena, astral projections, out of body experience, lucid dreaming. This is when the soul enters that 4D and 5D reality and realizing, oh my God, a lot of the things that I cause in the physical, it's actually made in the astral, like that type of introduction to that reality. And a lot of times what happens is that when a soul is touching that thing, there might be another soul kind of introducing them to that reality. And the first reaction is bounce off of it. And usually after that bouncing off of it, um, because it's a type of fear that they've not really dealt with it, to deal with that fact that they've been flashed, they go back into hedonistic or ascetic endeavors in the physical world. They both are, of course, whether it's a pleasure seeking or pain seeking, it is a deviation from the whole or holistic, right? Is a type of evil. It may also happen when the soul is living in a physical, an astral reality already, and how physical world is caused by the astral is obvious to them, and how the lucid dreaming, and astral projection, and they get to know that world of how it all works, just becomes normal to them. And that, by the way, in that particular world, the work is about also reducing that type of corruption there, but it's usually at an emotional level. This is what I've noticed. Usually you deal with the fears and all sorts of things, and then become as like a shadow beings in the astral, and you face them and you overcome them, and there's that the whole astral journey layer of the reality that you can deal with for the betterment, rather than seeking pleasure in the astral and becoming that pile of human meat, rubbing each other, which what Robert Monroe was talking about. You actually working on the real hero's journey in the astral reality, and facing your fears, and then fulfilling your soul desires, all that thing, right? So there's that world there. And then there's another layer, and if you're doing really well, you become a 5D soul. And there's of course all sorts of tests there as well. Some people, they go into this hedonistic pleasure seeking astrally, which is using psychedelics for the experiences, then all sorts of lust attacks that you may not be able to handle, and these lust attacks usually manifest somehow like the breaking the sanctity of two people being together, and it's all sorts of, again, this orgy kind of thing, which is usually, it's not necessarily orgy, but you see what I'm trying to say. It's about this breaking that yin and yang and making the pile of meat or whatever, like the whole thing there. Okay, so all sorts of challenges there, because you could still be astral soul, but you could be evil. And if you really double down on this, deriving pleasure from the separation, from breaking that love dynamic, or like, yeah, it's really breaking the love dynamic. And like the most extreme cases is where you are just completely separating yourself from the innocent and becoming superior, so superior, and you're so detached from love that you derive pleasure from subduing the innocence, right? That's the maximum evil. Okay, but you can be, they say that you could push the 5D. I don't think that this technically is true, because there's a difference between the 5D and the 4D, is that in the 5D there's love, and in 4D you can still be evil. This is why sometimes it's possible for some people to be 5D and evil, And perhaps it's just like a lower layer of the 5D, because it's a spectrum where you could say like you might as well say that the maxed out 4D evil, it's almost the beginning of the 5D, but they could never push it in there because that you will require love. But it's a maximum separation that somebody could have, and so that creates that false light, and that's Lush also called, and so that is what feeds the demiurge. And then the whole demiurge is a type of program that is programmed to be fed with that Lush, and that's why when it injects the hive mind of the people, where people start acting from the ego side, they act unconsciously, and they're always going to be seeking that resolution of suffering with pleasure. Okay. And there are some souls where they do the right thing and they don't go into this thing of pleasure seeking, which is, just because you're actually projecting and taking a lot of psychedelics does not mean that you're a good soul. I met a lot of evil people who are taking regular psychedelics, and talking about very spiritual talk, but the energy is the most separative, most selfish people that I've ever fucking met. And no matter how much I try to look, and find good in them, the only thing that I can find in common with them is basically the fabric of the consciousness itself. And so that's called compassion. So to these types of people, you can have compassion, which is a type of connectedness to everything, including them, as a fabric of consciousness, but not as that entity of being, which in this case you have nothing in common with them besides perhaps some experiences and understanding of why somebody would go that way, right? Because we all go at least for one round of that bouncing off of that threshold and going to the dark approach. And that's usually a response upon trying to, graduate, but having that reaction of no, refusing, right? So the hero's journey is always being refused in these stories. So it seems to be like the story that or that mythology that we know, and that's sort of made popular by Joseph Campbell, is also it's also stemming from this metaphysical thing that I'm talking about, and it moves like this: boom, hits, turns around, and comes back again, and then takes another chance. And so it seems that the first round is always going to go down, and then it's going to come back up again. And the second round, then there's no excuse, because you already know where this negation of accepting that, entering that new reality leads to, because that usually leads to rock bottom, and then you're given another chance, and then in that particular case you basically say yes, and that's normal. But some people don't say yes, and they keep going circling around, and to me that is a bit of a problem. But you can't drag them in. You can't. It does not work. It's amazing. Like, you can even say words, but they don't land, because energetically that person is just not moving in this way. So this is why you cannot like save anybody, so to speak, and say, hey, come to the light side kind of thing. We have cookies here. That doesn't work. I tried that. No matter how many cookies you have or how much milk you have, it's just doesn't work like that. But what does work is if you continue your own journey. And so in a way, there's a difference between being a boss and telling other people, hey, you're supposed to go this way, because if you go that way, that's bad, okay? And of course we all end up trying that thing because we don't want to go there by ourselves, so we're looking for the relatives, right? But then eventually there's a realization that's like, oh, you cannot do any of that stuff. And then you go by yourself. And then as you go by yourself, you're trailblazing it. And then what do you know? What happens then? When you go for it, you create a type of gravity for them too. And the gravity is being created not because they changed their mind and now they're thinking that like, oh, I'm supposed to. No, it's because their mischievous ways stops working. It stops producing pleasure. It stops producing these dopamine hits. And because it stops working, then they are made to be faced again and make a better choice. Okay? And in a way, they're being disciplined like that. Not by force, by trying to pull them into the level that they're supposed to be, living, or the direction of life that they're supposed to be living. But there's the type of spiritual punishment that they're receiving because you went the right way and you trailblazed the right way, and then there's a consequence of them because your energy is now moving in the right way. You cut out the energy supply to the system that is moving in the wrong way. And because you cut out the energy supply, now it's very hard for them to do the same things that they were doing before, because there was energy, because you were contributing, even by trying to save these people, because your attention is there and not what you need to be doing, which is alchemy in this case. So only when you are graduating from 5D to 6D, that's when it's no longer dealing with fears, which are emotions. You start dealing with what people sometimes call elements, but to me they are feelings. And so you're not dealing with the fear, you're dealing with the pain, right? You're not dealing with the depression, you're dealing with the pressure. And there's this another like a poison and confusion to have all these four elements. You start working with these elements, and that's the real alchemy. But you have to have graduated through the 3D, 4D, 5D, and only then that can only be experienced. This is why when I'm asking some people to place the attention from where all negative emotion is coming from, right? Few people can do it. Other people, they don't have that depth yet. And so they may be still functioning, on a astral level, and they may be good souls, but they have not yet faced their fears and, that level of evolution. They have not been through that level. So anyway, so there seems to be that what's going on. And it seems to be possible for the 3D soul becoming the 4D, 5D soul, and for 4D, 5D soul becoming the 6D soul. That evolution is seemingly possible. But my intuition tells me that the way it works is that if you incarnate on Earth as a 6D soul, you're gonna have to go through all of these quite quickly. If you incarnate as a 5D soul and whatnot, then again you're gonna have to go through quickly. But we all start at the 3D at the beginning. That's what it seems like to me. And then can you go beyond your current soul level? Yeah, I mean, why not? But anyway, so the message of the story is that after trying to save other people, quote unquote, or get some people to come with you, when that fails, you start just going by yourself, and then you're gonna meet the people that are also going by themselves. But now you are at least with the people of your tribe, and these are usually different people, right? But also the good news is that you are helping these other people that were refusing to go on the right way because they were too addicted to the hedonistic pleasure seeking and all this other nonsense. And addicted to the ego way of living, in a way, you end up disciplining them this way, because the veil sort of disappears and they say like, what am I doing here? What is this thing? Yeah, okay, before it used to give pleasure, which was just the alleviation of my pain, but now it doesn't even give me that, and now I have to deal with the pain that I have. And so now the readiness may be there, but it was done through what I would call like a tough love. You see what I'm trying to say? It wasn't being present and compassionate, because some egos cannot be broken through just being present and compassionate with these people. They can only be broken like this, by you just leading the way and energetically pulling them into that space. Okay? And cutting off the pathways into the dark way of living life. Okay? But it's part of your life. Like the people that are connected to you, and when you go on this alchemical journey, you are affecting them. But you don't even need to say anything to them. Don't need to say like, oh, why aren't you listening to me? You just go on your journey and they're going to be affected. And if you see that, like, how lost they are in it and how frustrating it is, you'll start seeing that they're gaining clarity as well. Okay? And then for them it's going to be easier because you already trailblazed the way. Right? That's why, like, the alchemist is trailblazing the way, and devotee or somebody who's doing the devotional approach to alchemy, it's easy. And of course, the more the people, when people do the devotion, it's easier for the alchemist, and the person who's doing the alchemy is easier for devotion, right? That's the real soul level, the highest level of game, the great work that only few souls are actually undergoing through this, are actually doing the work. They're working together. And that's why sometimes on this alchemical journey you may feel like there is other half of you, but you may not know what that is, who that is, or how. But you as a man, you work on your courage, and as a woman you work on a surrender, and every time there's this challenge that's coming your way, you can alchemize that. Okay? And sometimes you can't, but that's okay. It's just like when you are trying to create that philosopher's stone and you put all these ingredients, so to speak, boom, 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 and it crashes and your concoction does not work. That's all right. Just go back, because now next time you're going to be doing way better. This is what I've been experiencing. It wasn't just like a one-off. I've been making less and less errors as I go. That's what I can say. If the first year I was just always, going, 2 steps forward and 1 step back, the second year they were, maybe 5 steps forward, 1 step back. And then perhaps right now, I don't know, maybe 10, 20 steps forward, 1 step back. If I were to just use that type of analogy. Okay? Lust attacks, which there was one wave that was incredible. They can be overcome, but they're one of to me, to alchemize lust is one of the most difficult things, because it's that false light. It's that pleasure could be so sweet and so alluring. It's just like, hey, just to give in into this pleasure. This is exactly what I would have experienced. It just came over me, and it's like, hey, just let go. Look how awesome it is. Just be sexually promiscuous and and look how awesome this could your life be. You can be free, and I was just tempted with that sexual liberation vibe that was came over me, you know and I did not buy into this. I did not buy into this. And because I did not buy into this, now I'm paying the price, so to speak. And now I have to alchemize all of these energies because I did not give in to the pleasure seeking motion. To be honest, some of it, but it was not like it was not a total giving in into the lust, right? But it wasn't ideal, I should say, right? But it was very minor. And besides that minor hiccup, I should say that I've dealt with it pretty good. Like if that wave would come along again, um, then I know for sure that I would not have even a minor hiccup, and I would be able to deal completely. But I know the price that you pay when you say no to that. Because when you say no to that, then it says, okay, deal with at the soul level, deal with the pain, pressure, and all these other things that you have to deal with. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'll deal with this, but I'm not going into this world, you know. And so now for the last couple of days, I've been dealing with this pressure in my soul, in my chest, in my gut, and alchemizing and working on the pushing this through this Negredo stage again. Okay. And that's what it's like, the frame control, which is the external discipline, and internal alchemy, state control. And that's what will take you through this. Okay. Yeah. And don't worry about other people that are perhaps connected with you. They're just going to follow the suit automatically because you are energetically leading the way. Because look, if you look at everybody else around you, or a lot of people, they just say yes to this thing. They just like, let's open a relationship. All right, let's do this. Like, look at this. We can be free. We can be sexually liberated. And what a sucker's game this is. But again, I cannot blame them because that pull is so strong. And I've dealt with a lot of energies, but all sorts of energies, all sorts of challenges. But the pull is so sweet, It's this. It's really sounds convincing. This like it as a solution to everything in your life. Jesus, and I even at the same time I would just like watch some videos and people were talking about like spring break, I just slept with the 10 guys, and so it's just like celebrated, I was like, okay, you first of all, and the other part of me is like, really, is this is what we're gonna be doing? Is this like what liberation is? No, no, I got sort of disgusted by this, and I just doubled down and I said no. No, I recognize this as another lust attack and double down on the alchemy. And I'm glad that I did. Obviously, I mean, I'm in it to win it. Like I'm at this point in my life, there's no way back for me. I can't just, it's not possible actually for me. I don't think it is. But that's why this journey is such a tough navigation course, because there's no plan, right? There is no plan. You figure everything on the way, and as I'm figuring everything on the way, I'm kind of making my own little plan. And like for example, the causal, astral, and physical, I can see how they are like just these discs on one plane, and they project the holographic experiences, and you have like one astral which is at the top, and you have physical at the bottom. As above so below, right? The at the top, the astral projection is actually has a recording capacity on that magnetic disk, and the bottom has the reading capacity or the interaction with that magnetic disk. And then you have soul, which has this complete toroidal field capacity. And when that is completely united in your soul, there's this as within as without, which is what? The feelings. As within the feelings, so are the sensations. Like I talked about, like the world of sensation becomes so amazing, so ecstatic, but good ecstatic, not that false ecstasy through lust. It's real direct experience of life with no filter. And so there's that as within, so without. As within there's a diamond, so without does your sensation. The worlds of sensation becomes ecstatic. So there's the like I could see all that model, that holographic model, because I'm living and I can see this. Uh, and 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 as I'm another thing is that because you're going to unknown, you have to also realize that some of that even ideas, they may not even exist. So especially when trailblazing and you're very very close to that edge, that unknown, because you're basically going into the complete unknown, and so some mystery thing that's going to pop out of it, and it's going to deliver that type of information or that type of insight or that type of idea to the entire collective reality. So, and in a way, you're just like pushing the entire reality towards more coherence, and therefore in a different timeline. And as you do that, anyway, as you push through that edge, you're gonna have to introduce something to reality that had never been introduced before. Okay, it may seem like, well, all information already exists, like it's all available, but specific combination, specific pattern is going to be introduced to reality that had never been introduced before. That's how cutting edge this thing is. And because it's never been introduced before, you can never get it from the outside. And when I say outside, not even from the astral world. So this is why a lot of people do the astral traveling, get the information there, they bring it back and they say, well, this is how it all works. But they just took a sample and a snapshot of that one particular version of that particular timeline. And they even say like, well, there's a grid around the earth, there's a demiurge grid and nobody can leave it, because this is the perspective that they were reading at that particular case. And that is not a complete information, but they say it as a complete information because I explored the astral world. Well, the people who are alchemizing the causal reality, which causes the entire astral world, changes that, and then you can astral project and check that again in another version of the coherence of the earth, and you'll find something else. And now this other thing is going to be true, and then you're going to be talking about that, right? This is why if just because somebody actually projects a remote view does not mean that what they bring is true. The maximum that they can bring is that level of coherence for that particular timeline. That's what they could bring, right? And only the much more like overall view of all the possibilities of even that these permutations of the astral realities can only be picked up by the 60 and 70. layers of the reality. Right? So have in mind that when these people, these prophets and whatever, read that thing and they bring it out, they just what they said, what is one that particular version, that one particular timeline. But given the fact that there was no alchemical change, it may come true. But if there was an alchemical change, the coherence change, and that thing is not going to come true. This is what you notice, that in the past, a lot of these predictive people, prophets, whatever, they're not really prophets because they just see what is going to happen given the fact that nothing changes in that particular timeline. That's what they show it to you, right? But what's been happening lately? They've been wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong because there was a change in the coherence of the entire reality. Okay? So in a way, all of them are sort of like their foresight is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. They cannot foresee too far into the future because it's not cyclical anymore and it mutates, and so they can't see that. And the only person that can see that, or the being or the soul that can see that, is the one who's creating it as it's happening. And so you cannot see further than that. Even the person at the edge of life cannot see further than the version of the reality that's currently being created, which is far enough. You see, of course, like all these universal patterns are universal, so these things could be seen, thousands and million years ahead because you're just looking at the pattern. But the events that's taking place are just going to be taking place at the, at that level of the coherence. And really, if the planet is moving at that level of coherence, these are the events that are going to happen. And so these are predictable events. Coherence changes, other types of events are going to happen. And every time coherence changes, other events happen. Anyway, I hope it makes sense. And I did not went too deep into this. But anyway, the message of the story, just keep doing what you're doing. Forget about bringing people on board onto this. It doesn't work like that. Just keep doing what you're doing and trailblaze and do what you have to do. Okay? And you'll see that reality is indeed reflecting that change. Okay? And this way, for example, when somebody functioning at this level, this alchemical level, is no longer the imagination level. You don't need to work with imagination because with imagination doesn't really change the coherence level of the planet. Does that make sense? So there are people meditating and say, well, let's just change the coherence level of the planet. This is only just imaginary level, and that's just pseudo. That's not the real coherence. Okay? But the real coherence, it's strong, permanent, and on the energy level. And the fact that nothing to do with the imagination yet. And it's actually, there's like a very strong energetical currents that's running through your system and through your body and through your soul. That's what it feels like. And then when you go to that peaceful, blissful state, that you know that your body is in a higher coherence, or your system is in a higher coherence. Therefore, the planet and maybe even the universe or cosmos has to reflect that also, somehow, some way. This is just, of course, my theory, my insight, that your soul resonance, when you are the soul and you're trailblazing the coherence, that only then the coherence of the planet changes, and the coherence of the solar system changes, and coherence of the galaxy, universe, and cosmos changes. But this only happens through alchemy. Because otherwise you're working within the sphere that's already been created, within the coherence level that's already been created. All right, that's enough for today, okay? So keep on keeping on and quit that giving attention to the things that don't really, does that make sense? Like, just give up on all of that stuff and just, because when you stop losing the energy there, then you have all the energy that is necessary to place on this thing inside that is required for you to even handle that level of pain, pressure, and whatnot, right? And that level of presence that is required of you, that intensity. But if you give leaking the energy onto other things, and you're having all these other people to worry about and drag on board, then you don't have enough energy that is required to go through the eye of a needle. And going through the eye of a needle and changing the coherence of your system and the entire planet system is the best help that you can give to everybody. Even the biggest schmucks are going to start behaving better and start apologizing for the things that they've done, realizing that, oh, there's a better way. Oh, what I was doing, I thought I was helping people, but I was really just, just contributing to the problem. All of that is going to happen. Okay? And you create the best way, create an environment in where the evil cannot survive. That's my take on it. And honestly, like, what I've been trying to fulfill my soul desires, the soul desires that I really wanted, the matrix would not permit that to happen. And then it seems that in my case, I have no choice, but I have to break the entire matrix so I could have my soul desires to be, fulfilled. That's what it seems like in my case. That's like, hey, you're not gonna have that. So all right, so if I cannot have that, and it's the reason because the coherence level and people slip into that low coherence, and that's why I can't really be with them, then all right, I'll just break the entire fucking system so then I could be with my tribe, I can be with my people. At least that's my functioning right now. All right, guys, peace. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.